It was a Tuesday evening, just like any other.
The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the quiet suburban street. Inside, the warm glow of a living room lamp illuminated a scene of domestic comfort. Mark kissed his wife, Sarah, on the cheek, the familiar scent of her perfume a comforting anchor in his world. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice casual, easy. "Just need to grab some milk." "Home in 5," Sarah nodded, already turning her attention back to the simmering pot on the stove, not even looking up as the front door clicked shut behind him.
She didn't know it then, but that soft click was the sound of her world breaking apart.
It was the last time she would ever hear his voice, the last time she would ever see him. 5 minutes. It was a promise made and a promise broken in the most devastating way imaginable.
5 minutes stretched into 10, then 20.
Sarah glanced at the clock, a small frown creasing her brow. The milk.
It was a simple errand. A 2-minute drive to the corner store.
Mark was usually so punctual, so reliable.
Another 10 minutes passed. She called his phone. It rang and rang, the unanswered tone echoing in the suddenly cavernous silence of their home. A prickle of unease, small but sharp, started to crawl up her spine.
Maybe there was a long line. Maybe he ran into a neighbor. She tried to reason away the growing knot of fear in her stomach, but it tightened with every passing second. An hour later, the milk forgotten, the dinner cold. Sarah was pacing the floor, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs.
She called his phone again.
This time, it went straight to voicemail. In this episode of Midnight Confessions, we delve into a case that starts with the most mundane of goodbyes and spirals into a decade-long mystery.
We follow the heartbreaking timeline of Mark's disappearance, piece together the baffling clues he left behind, and examine the chilling final sighting that turned an ordinary evening into a labyrinth of unanswered questions. What happened to the man who said he'd be home in 5 minutes? The truth, as we will discover, is far darker and more complex than anyone could have ever imagined.
The initial hours were a blur of frantic phone calls and rising panic.
Sarah called Mark's parents, his brother, his closest friends.
Had they heard from him, seen him? Each negative response was another blow, another chip in the fragile wall of hope she was trying to build. By midnight, she couldn't wait any longer.
Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, her voice cracking as she explained the situation to the dispatcher.
A husband, a simple errand, a promise of 5 minutes that had now stretched into a 5-hour bit. The police arrived, their presence both a comfort and a terrifying confirmation that this was real.
They took her statement, their questions professional, but tinged with a familiar skepticism. Had they argued? Were there any problems at home?
Any financial stress?
Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No. Everything was perfect. They were happy.
They were planning a vacation. They were talking about starting a family.
They were just a normal couple, living a normal life.
Until now.
The investigation began immediately.
Mark's car, a standard blue sedan, was missing. His wallet and keys were gone. But his phone, the one that went straight to voicemail, was later discovered by Sarah, tucked between the cushions of his favorite armchair.
It was a bizarre detail, the first of many. Why would he leave for the store without his phone? The one thing no one leaves home without anymore.
It didn't make sense. It was the first crack in the simple narrative of a quick trip for milk. The next morning, the police found his car. It was parked 2 towns over, in the deserted lot of a long-abandoned warehouse district.
The doors were unlocked. The keys were in the ignition.
A half-empty carton of milk sat on the passenger seat, already beginning to sour in the morning sun.
But there was no sign of Mark.
No sign of a struggle. No blood. No broken glass.
It was as if he had driven there, parked the car, and simply vanished into thin air.
The discovery of the car only deepened the mystery. The location was miles of his route to the corner store, in a direction he had no reason to go.
Friends and family were questioned again. No one could think of any connection Mark had to that part of the city. He didn't know anyone there. He had no business there.
It was a dead end, a geographical anomaly that pointed to nothing and everything all at once.
As days turned into weeks, Sarah's home became a command center of grief and desperation. The walls were covered with missing posters, Mark's smiling face a constant, painful reminder of what she had lost.
Friends and neighbors brought casseroles and offered condolences, their hushed tones and pitying glances a heavy shroud she couldn't escape.
She replayed that final evening over and over in her mind, dissecting every word, every gesture.
The kiss, the casual home in 5. Was there something she missed?
A flicker of worry in his eyes,
a tremor in his voice, but there was nothing. Only the crushing weight of normalcy. The police investigation continued, but leads were scarce.
They combed through Mark's financial records, his emails, his work computer.
They found nothing out of the ordinary. He was a successful architect, well liked by his colleagues, with no known debts or enemies. He wasn't leading a double life. There were no secret affairs, no hidden gambling problems. The more they dug, the more perfect his life seemed, making his disappearance all the more inexplicable.
Then, a month into the investigation, a potential breakthrough emerged.
A witness came forward. A truck driver who had been making a late-night delivery remembered seeing a car matching the description of Mark's sedan parked in the warehouse lot.
More importantly, he remembered seeing two men standing near the vehicle, engaged in what looked like a tense conversation. He couldn't make out their faces clearly in the dim light, but one of them matched Mark's general build. The other was taller, broader, and wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt.
The truck driver didn't think much of it at the time and drove on. But now, his memory felt like a crucial piece of a puzzle no one could solve. This was the chilling final sighting. It was the last time anyone, besides his potential abductor or killer, saw Mark alive. The presence of a second man shifted the entire focus of the investigation. This was no longer just a man who wandered off. This pointed towards something far more sinister.
Was it a carjacking gone wrong?
A pre-arranged meeting that took a violent turn. The police had a new direction, but with no description of the second man. They were still chasing a ghost. Years began to pass.
The case went cold.
The missing posters faded and tore in the wind. The news crews stopped calling.
The world moved on, but for Sarah, time stood still.
She remained in their home, a living museum of a life that was. She never changed a thing, half expecting Mark to walk through the door at any moment, apologizing for being so late. The milk was still in the fridge, a solidified, grotesque monument to a broken promise.
Her hope, once a burning flame, had dwindled to a faint, flickering ember, but it never fully went out.
5 years after Mark vanished, Sarah received a letter.
It was an anonymous, typewritten note, with no return address.
The postmark was from a city 3 states away. It contained only one sentence. He found out about the foundation. He had to be stopped. The foundation. What foundation? The words meant nothing to Sarah.
She took the letter to the police, who were initially dismissive. It could be a cruel prank, a twisted attempt to prey on her grief.
But something about the stark, cold finality of the words felt terrifyingly real.
They reopened the case, focusing on this new cryptic clue. They dove back into Mark's work, re-examining every project, every client, every blueprint.
As an architect, he worked with numerous construction companies and developers, many of whom used charitable foundations for tax purposes.
It was a needle in a haystack.
But this time, they looked not just at the surface, but at the deep, complex structures of finance and ownership. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to uncover a dark underbelly to one of Mark's recent projects. It was a large-scale commercial development he had been overseeing for a powerful, well-respected corporation. On the surface, everything was legitimate, but hidden deep within the labyrinthine financial documents and shell corporations was a money laundering scheme of staggering proportions.
The company's charitable foundation wasn't for charity at all. It was a front, a pipeline for washing illicit funds. The theory began to form, chilling in its clarity. Mark, known for his meticulous attention to detail, must have stumbled upon it.
Perhaps it was an accounting error he couldn't reconcile, a structural payment that didn't add up. He was a good man, an honest man.
He would have felt compelled to report it, to do the right thing, and in doing so, he signed his own death warrant.
The home in 5 was never about the mill. It was a lie, a cover for a meeting he had arranged, a meeting to confront someone about what he had discovered.
The man in the hooded sweatshirt was no random stranger. He was an enforcer, sent to silence the man who knew too much. The tense conversation the truck driver witnessed was not an argument.
It was an ultimatum.
And when Mark refused to be bought or intimidated, he was taken.
The abandoned car, the milk on the seat, it was all deliberate. A carefully staged scene designed to look like a simple, baffling disappearance, to send the police chasing their tails for years.
Armed with this new theory, the police launched a covert investigation into the corporation, but they were up against a wall of money, power, and high-priced lawyers. The people behind the scheme were virtually untouchable, shielded by layers of legal protection.
They could never gather enough direct evidence to press charges for Mark's disappearance.
The paper trail proved the financial crimes, and some executives eventually faced justice for fraud, but the link to Mark remained circumstantial.
His body was never found. No one ever confessed. The truth brought Sarah no peace. It only confirmed her worst fears and replaced the agony of not knowing with the agony of knowing too much. Her husband hadn't just vanished. He had been stolen from her, erased from the world for his own integrity. He was a hero, but his heroism was a secret no one could ever officially acknowledge. The mystery was solved, but there was no closure, no justice for Mark. The story of Mark is a devastating reminder of how quickly the ordinary can become the horrific.
A simple promise, a routine errand, a life full of love and potential, all of it obliterated in a matter of moments by the dark secrets that can lie just beneath the surface of our world.
It teaches us a difficult lesson, that sometimes doing the right thing comes at an unimaginable cost, and that for the families left behind, some wounds never heal, and some questions, even when answered, offer no solace at all.
If you or anyone you know has information about an unsolved case, please contact your local authorities.
Your single piece of information might be the key that finally brings a family the closure they so desperately deserve. You are not just a viewer.
You could be the missing piece.
Join us next time as we explore another story hidden in the shadows.
Subscribe now, and don't forget to turn on your notifications. You won't want to miss what we uncover next.